I'm 5'3", 115 pounds, so I guess I'm pretty small. That's my reasoning for being very submissive over all of this. This is a lengthy story, so I'm just going to skim, and I'm not the best at telling the story, so prepare yourself. When I started working at this fast food chain, I was 16. It was my first job, and I was excited to finally take my first steps into adulthood. This coworker of mine was training me. For privacy purposes, I'll call him Frank. Frank at first glance looks young, 19, 21 at the most. We got along and nothing was too bad nor alarming. Like conversations about anime and such. I remember things started to change slightly when he was talking about a video game character, and none of our coworkers knew who it was. When I saw the green hat character, I said, "Oh, that's Link. How cute. I used to watch my brother play Legend of Zelda: Four Swords." He looked at me and said, "Marry me." I laughed it off and continued on with my day. For the rest of my shift, he would hover over me asking me personal questions like my age, my favorite things, and etc. Being the open, friendly person I was, I answered happily. I told him how I loved butterflies and that I was 16. I'm 17 now and have had several jobs since then. When an older man asks you for your age as a minor, it's never a nice sign. Moving on to December, I've been at this chain for a month now. My manager asked me if I wanted to come to their company Secret Santa party, and I agreed. When the day came, I arrived with my now ex-best friend. Frank arrives on the phone, acting busy and such, but I thought nothing of it. During the whole party, he was on the phone. I was getting food when he tapped my shoulder, still on the phone, and handed me a beautifully butterfly necklace. I didn't know what to say, besides thanking him, thinking he was my Secret Santa. And then later, my other coworker comes up to me, handing me a gift card to Starbucks and a plush. I asked why, and she said that she was my Secret Santa. I thought that it must have been a mistake and went on with my night listening to my old best friend tell me how I should date Frank, which in my mind was never on the table. January rolls around and it was Frank's birthday. We were just working until I heard one of my girl coworkers, who was into him at the time, wish him a happy birthday. Being that person, I wish him happy birthday while my other coworker asked how old he's turning. He said 27. Might I add that every shift I worked with him, he would take several photos of me before and after my shift, commenting about my hair, my skin, and my eyes. He often said how cute my nose was. Again, not wanting to cause a scene. I just laugh everything off. That's always the case, isn't it? We don't want to cause a scene. I did start telling him to please stop, but of course, he wouldn't, no matter how many times I asked him to. Now, I'm going to skip to May, my birthday month, and of course, I was working on my birthday. I went to the back door as usual. Due to everything going on, I had to ring a doorbell and wait for someone to open the door. Out of nowhere, Frank pops out of the bushes handing me all kinds of gifts. Today was his day off too, so I was confused. I remember thinking, how the hell did he know my birthday? I never talked to him about it since I don't like celebrating it. He followed me around for a few minutes before awkwardly leaving when I apologized that I wanted to get to work and not get yelled at. In July was when I finally found a new job. I quit due to sexual harassment that I had to endure for the 9 months I worked there from my shift lead. That's a whole other story, but when a man starts getting handsy, don't laugh it off and shut that down. It got really bad when that ex-best friend that I had mentioned earlier started showing all my coworkers, including Frank, and that shift lead, explicit photos of me that she stole off my phone without me knowing. I was very insecure at the time and was in an abusive relationship, so I would give anything this boy had asked of me. Anyways, at that point, I had about had it. After being interrogated about that shift lead, I put in my 2 weeks. On my last week, everyone was talking about how that shift lead got laid off for sexual harassment. Frank and I were doing dishes and the topic came up. I awkwardly told him about it, now knowing how everyone knew my story. The shift lead would often grab my butt, rub my thigh, talk about my boobs about, only if they were bigger, things he would do to my body, etc. I would say stop politely, but he would continue. When I started yelling and saying stop more assertively, he would often make me do humiliating tasks like cleaning the greasy floors on my hands and knees, or cleaning the dining room when it was closed due to the virus. And when I told Frank this, he shrugged it off and said that there was no reason for him to be fired. I remember being absolutely shocked, retorting, "I'm just glad that I'm leaving this hellhole," and I left it at that. A month into my new job as a hostess, everything was going well. It's a restaurant, but everyone just comes there to drink, so it's more of a bar. On one of my 2 a.m. shifts, Frank stops by on his bike. I tried to be friendly, but I was getting frustrated when he kept cutting me off from talking to other people. I then walked away to bus tables because no one else would do it, and he couldn't follow me into the restaurant. There was only outdoor seating, of course. After bussing all the tables, I come up to the counter to see my coworkers giggling. "What's happening?" I asked. The other hostess smiled. "That's so cute how your boyfriend takes photos of you while you're working. That's so cute how obsessive he is over you. He wouldn't stop talking about you to us." Boyfriend? I was and still happily remained single after all that bullcrap of a relationship. The only person that they could be referring to was Frank. And then it dawned on me. How the hell did he know where I was working and my shift schedule? I didn't tell anyone besides my parents and my brother. A week goes by and Frank comes back. I may have gotten a little overdramatic, but I didn't know what else to do. I told the other host at the counter to tell him I'm not working today, and I dashed inside. I told my manager that this man, Frank, keeps taking photos of me as I'm working, and it's making me uncomfortable. My manager told me to stay in the back room while he went and handled the situation. Our restaurant is very popular in the area, so it's very crowded in the front. Frank with his bike would block customers, and that's what my manager was telling him. My idiotic ass was popping my head up a little under that back room window where I could see what was going on in front. I freak out a little when I see Frank get aggressive with my manager. He begins thrashing when my manager tries to lead him out of the front. Suddenly, Frank throws his bike and tries heading into the building. A few male waiters see what's happening and were informed by my manager. I remember one waiter standing in the background with me watching the door, as another was practically fighting with Frank. I could only hear yelling outside the door and then it went quiet. I spent the rest of the shift like that, cleaning silverware with that male server. From then on, people would walk me to my car even if it was in broad daylight. From August to November, he would be on his bike passing by the restaurant from a distance. He would just be watching and taking photos for 10 to 20 minutes before leaving. Now, the reason I thought of putting this here was it's been a little more intense besides just the looking from a distance. Due to the virus, I'm not needed anymore because now my restaurant is takeout only. I've been working seasonal jobs while working at the restaurant, but now I'm not working, waiting to get my schedule. Because I was bored this day, I drove to my local mall just to do some Christmas shopping. While driving, I look in the rearview mirror to see a recognizable face. It was Frank. I practically choke on spit seeing his face in my mirror. I try not to get the best of myself and knock it off as a coincidence. It wasn't. He followed me throughout the mall and then later followed me as I was driving home. No one knows where I live besides that old friend, and I would like to keep it at that. So I drove for an hour, getting lost and taking every random turn I could until I lost him. I now believe this is how he would track me down. My car isn't common, but it doesn't stand out too much. I've rarely left my house since. It's January 2021, and ever since the start of this new year, I've been getting phone calls going like, "Hello?" Somebody breathing into the phone like a creep. "Hello?" and the call ends. Along with that, I've gotten many random messages about asking about gifts and delivering me a gift. I'm not one who usually uses social media, but these messages were all over mine. All of them were from newly made accounts across Snapchat and Instagram. On one occasion, an account started sending me photos that I never sent to anyone. These photos were photos of my cat and that I had saved in my Snapchat account. Just photo after photo of things I've never sent, and ending with, "I have a gift for you." I deleted both apps along with deleting almost everything off my phone. A week ago, I downloaded Snapchat again due to some dumb assignments my teacher wanted us to do with that crap social media app. One of my old coworkers sent me a message and I opened it. "Frank wants to give you your Christmas gift. You want to stop by?" Maybe I'm just overreacting, or maybe those accounts were Frank. I just want to say that my personality has changed because of all of this. I'm very protective now. I rarely talk to anyone, not as friendly as I was then. It's only been a little over a year yet I feel like I've aged more than 10. I just want to say, Frank, I don't want your Christmas gift. When I was 8 or 9 years old, my stepmom's family had invited us to a party. This place was a community hall, and in front of the building was a big car park, and to the right of the building was a big playing field with a play park. Being 9 years old, I didn't want to sit inside, so I bought my Heelys. You know, the ones with wheels on the bottom of the shoes, so I could scoot around the car park. I was in the car park and this car was parked up near where I was playing. My dad came out to shout at me to come in, to sing happy birthday, and then I went straight back outside. Amy, not my real name, come in to sing happy birthday. I loved being outside. It was my favorite place, plus I wanted a Heely. Anyway, I'm playing outside when all of a sudden, I start hearing, "Amy, Amy, Amy, come here. Amy, come here," in an almost whisper. The guy from the car that was parked up earlier was stood in front of his car on an embankment, and it was him calling my name. I ran inside to tell my dad. I was petrified. I hid behind my auntie's chair and stayed there. My dad went marching out. My partner now is 6'5", and he will not get on the wrong side of my dad, just to give you a little bit of reference. All I know after that is this guy tried to threaten to beat up my dad, and my dad was having none of it. The guy who had been calling my name said that he was actually calling his dog. I don't know many people with a dog named Amy, and I had also not seen a dog with him. I am unsure whether this guy was telling the truth or not, but still, little 9-year-old me was petrified. I didn't go back outside after that. As I said, I'm unsure of his intentions, but I do not want to be that freaked out again. I've read so many stories here, so I decided to submit my own. About 6 years ago, I was with my friend Tom at my parents' cabin. We decided to head off to a casino located on an Ojibwe reserve about 40 minutes away. The entire stretch of highway between is heavily forested and has no lights, meaning it can get incredibly dark. We got there and played some poker, tried a few table games, and grabbed some dinner with our winnings. A pretty successful night overall for the both of us. We ended up leaving the casino at around 1 a.m. A little later than I would have liked, given the lack of any streetlights. We drive for about 20 minutes on the highway without passing any other vehicles, when I noticed 2 green orbs just off the highway before a hill. Realizing it was a deer, I slammed on the brakes and waited. Several deer crossed and we resumed driving. The car was going slowly up the hill because it was a starting stop. As soon as we make it over the crest of the hill, Tom screamed, "Holy crap!" Right in front of us was a young woman walking in the middle of our lane towards us, no more than maybe 30 feet away. I slam on the brakes again and come within 10 feet of her. Thankfully, slowing down earlier and climbing the hill meant that we weren't going fast. But what was going through my mind wasn't the fact that I nearly ran over someone. It was that this young woman with pitch black hair was wearing a white nightgown, with no shoes, and was still walking towards us with a blank expressionless face. Not going to lie, that image frightened me, because it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Tom and I waited to see if she was going to pull up to our window and maybe ask for help or something. She made it to the front of my car and went around the driver's side. She didn't stop, but she raised her hand and dragged it across the side of my car, while continuing her walk. At this point, Tom and I were both freaked out. I asked Tom what to do. He said that we should just get out of here. For whatever reason, I just didn't feel right about leaving, and not asking if she was alright. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that she was still walking. Having almost hit her and knowing that something just wasn't right, I decided to do something. I told Tom that I was going to ask if she was alright. Tom pleaded that we just go and get out of here. I put on some bravado and told him not to worry and that I would be right back. I put on my blinkers and I stepped out of my car. I left my door open to provide some light and I walked around to the trunk of my car. My interior lights didn't do much blinking, but it allowed me to see an outline of her slightly down the hill. Only able to see her every other second, I yelled, "Are you alright?" She finally stopped walking, but still faced the other way. There was no response. I heard Tom's door open as he was getting out to join me. Suddenly, she started screaming. Tom and I ran back into my car and I just floored it. I got a lot of crap from Tom for the remainder of the ride back to my cabin. I haven't heard or seen anything like that on the highway since then, and I'm pretty thankful for it. That was the creepiest moment of my life. This took place back in 2016. I, at the time, was a 16-year-old girl at a summer camp. This summer camp took place at a college about 45 minutes away from me. I was there for filmmaking and knew everyone in the program. Yes, there were other programs such as dance, drama, and visual arts, but there was still a limited amount of people. The film camp lasted longer than all of the other ones, so by the last week, there were about 50 of us on campus, so you remember faces. There was a certain spot on campus where a lot of people would go to watch the sunset. Two of my friends and I decided to sit out there. There were many people to begin with, so we felt comfortable. I should have mentioned this earlier, but the campus is located in the sketchier part of town, and there are gates to enter from the outside. As it got darker and darker, more and more people went back to their dorms. The three of us stayed out even in the dark. There were street lamps, and I had my camera, and one friend had her laptop, so it wasn't pitch black. It was about 9:30 p.m. and a man walked in front of us. We waved and smiled as he walked by. The only thing is, I had never seen him before. Even a week ago, before all the other sessions left, I had never seen him before, and at most, there had been about 250 people on campus. I tell my friends that it kind of creeped me out and that I've never seen him, but the one with the laptop said it was nothing to worry about, seeing that there was campus security doing a checkup on the building near us. About 10 minutes go by and he walks in front of us again. After he leaves, the friend with the laptop in a worried voice says, "We need to go." We grab all of our belongings and are walking fast back to the dorms, and get her to explain to me what had her so worried. She said that when we walked by again, he looked over his shoulder and did a head nod into the distance, and when she looked over, she saw another man in the darkness. We laughed it off as we got close to the dorms, but all I could think to myself was, why didn't we leave when I said we should? Nobody ever listens to me, even though I have great intuition. Anyway, creepy men who seemingly were planning on mugging us. Thankfully, we didn't meet. A little bit of backstory. I had just finished high school and had recently turned 18 when all of this occurred. I was looking forward to starting university. and was going to move out of my parents' house into student housing closer to the campus. As a result, I started looking for a job closer to my residence. I found one about a 5-minute walk from where I was going to be living, and it was perfect for me. I was to be a barista in a tiny little coffee kiosk on one of the coolest streets in the city. The street was sort of known for prostitution and drugs, but it was also super popular as it hosted some of the most interesting events and also contained some of the nicest thrift stores in the city. What was even more ideal about my new job was the fact that I worked right across the road from my best friend. Let's call her Phoebe. At the time, Phoebe was in love with her job. She was actively being given more responsibilities and she was being promised the world by her employers. Many of these promises turned out to be false at the time, but that's another story. During one of her shifts, Phoebe was approached by a man who had seemingly become a regular at the place that she was working. We'll call him Richard. He told her that if she ever wanted to leave her job, he had just become the manager of a new restaurant a little ways down the road. Phoebe kindly denied his offer. He approached her several more times with this same offer before she recommended him our other close friend. We can call her Mia. Mia was hesitant to take the position at first because she had a passionate hatred for hospitality and greatly prefers retail, but she did need the extra money at the time and she took the job. The day that Mia was signing her contract, Phoebe and I both finished work early around 4. So we told Mia that we would meet her at her new job once we had finished, and then we would go and do something after. Phoebe and I went to the cake shop next door and sat outside her work while we waited for Mia. When they finished, Richard followed Mia outside to come say hi to Phoebe. The girls introduced him to me and a conversation ensued. He seemed like a friendly guy, if not a little bit awkward. He was late 30s, early 40s, bird-like in appearance, quite short, balding, larger in size, and he seemed very greasy. As the conversation continued, I began to tease Mia a little bit as friends do. I saw no harm in it, as she was one of my best friends and she had made a similar joke at my expense prior to this interaction. Richard's demeanor suddenly seemed to switch. He became somewhat catty in defense of Mia. He retorted back that if I was going to be mean to his staff, that he would bar me from every store in the street that we worked on. This seemed ridiculous, but he claimed to be friends with the security guard that worked in the street. I actually was friends with this man, and when I asked him about it, he told me that he had never heard of Richard before. Richard said these things to me as though he was joking, but he was so persistent about it that I got incredibly uncomfortable and I wanted to cry. It was from this interaction that he nicknamed me Trouble. I also feel it needs to be noted that he didn't scold Mia or Phoebe at all for the same behavior. Phoebe sensed my discomfort and told me that we had to leave as we had plans. Flash forward a few weeks and Phoebe and I decide to go see Mia at work again. Richard intrudes on our conversation yet again, and again he singles me out from the group, teasing me and only referring to me as Trouble. This time, I just play along as I can tell it isn't going to stop. He asks Mia if she is after another job as he needs someone to clean his home, and lives all the way out where my parents and Mia live. Mia tells him that she can't as she already has too many responsibilities, but I tell him that I might know a few people in the area that might do it, and I give him my phone number. Richard takes this as a sign that I have agreed to do it myself, and begins texting me incessantly about setting up a meeting. This man is much older than me and lives alone in a rural area. Suddenly, my instincts kick in, and I try to get out of it by telling him that I can't drive. He says that he can pick me up from the nearest train station. I don't want to come across as impolite or have my best friend's boss resent her because of me, so I make the mistake of agreeing. However, I tell him that my sister will be helping me as she is looking for a part-time job, and my dad will be dropping me off. I do this in order to have some backup and so that my dad knows my whereabouts. Richard goes on to complain about how I don't trust him and claims that his house is very small, and the $100 that he's going to pay me won't be enough to split with my sister. I tell him that I just want to provide her with work experience, and finally agrees, asking how old she is. My sister is 17. Richard and I finally find a time that I am not working to schedule a meeting. This meeting is held at his place of work, and I feel a lot more comfortable sitting in the main restaurant surrounded by people, as I thought he was going to hold a meeting in an office. We begin talking about the responsibilities of the job. He tells me it'll be basic things like tidying up, vacuuming, the usual. I agree, and he then goes to tell me that he will also be expecting me to do his laundry. I think this is a bit odd, as he's only paying a small amount for such a large job. He assures me his house is small and not that messy, but continuously claims it just needs a woman's touch. I nod and ignore the fact that this grown man thinks that, just because he's a man, it means he doesn't need to know how to maintain his own home. Now, this is where things start to get creepy. Near the end of the meeting, he asks me again how old my sister is, and when I say 17, his face drops. He then starts telling me about how he previously posted this ad on Craigslist, and this 60-year-old woman replied offering to do it in her lingerie. He tells me how he didn't even ask for that in the ad, but she had offered and he was put off completely. He then proceeds to tell me that he would be willing to pay more to someone between the ages of 18 and 30 if they were willing to do that, but he would never request that because he's not a pervert. I call BS at this and tell him then and there that this meeting is done and that I have to go and meet Phoebe. He asked me if he had made me uncomfortable. Well, yeah, you did. But I say no on that. I'll get back to him. This strange man who I've only met 3 times then attempts to hug me, but I ignore it and awkwardly wave goodbye from less than 3 feet away. I boost it down the street to Phoebe's work and tell her the whole story. She tells me that I can't do it, and I tell her I know, but I don't know how to tell him that without risking my own safety or Mia's job. Fortunately, Richard gives me the perfect out. He texts me later this afternoon telling me the hopes that I am okay with cats because he is a small one. I see this as the perfect opportunity and lie to him, telling him that my sister and I are both deathly allergic, and neither of us will be open to doing the job. Richard accepts this reasoning after a little persuasion, and I think that I'm finally done with him. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Richard proceeded to text me every day asking if I'm mad at him, or if he had made me uncomfortable, asking me how my day was and so on. Just behaving like a preteen in a new relationship basically. And the more that I ignored him, the more he texted. I finally blocked him in March of 2019. This escapade had begun 4 to 5 months prior to this. The blocking didn't stop him though. Mia informed me that Richard was no longer going to be working there, as he had to go in for surgery and we wouldn't have to see him anymore. You see, Richard hadn't only been harassing me, but to Mia and Phoebe too, just to a lesser extent. One Saturday morning while I was working, setting up at around 7:45, Richard showed up at my work. The divider was down as we were closed, so he came and stood in the doorway, the only exit that I had available to me at the time. He started asking me why I was ignoring him and telling me about his surgery. I told him that he wasn't allowed to stand there as it was a fire exit, but he didn't budge. Fortunately, my boss showed up shortly after and told Richard that he was going to phone the security if he didn't move. My boss was kind of an ass on most days, but holy crap, was I grateful for him that morning. Roughly a month after that experience, I thought Richard was gone from my life. I was living in my new apartment. Mia was around all the time and loved her job without Richard there. Things were going well for us. One morning after a night of drinking, me and the flatmates became peckish. I decided to order us some greasy food on a food delivery app. Lo and behold, guess who our delivery driver is? Yeah, Richard. I turned to my boyfriend at the time and tell him that he has to go collect the food. He doesn't understand, but Mia assures him that it's important. He agrees and goes out to collect it. Richard is not driving the vehicle he claims to be driving in the app, and at first we're confused. Plus, the number plate is also different. Mia and I watch from his bedroom window, and the interaction takes much longer than expected. He comes back and we ask what took him so long. He tells us that Richard refused to give him the food until he could prove that he was my boyfriend. He had recognized my name from the app and now he knew where we lived. Me and I tell my flatmates the story of what happened, and we all agree that it's a good idea to go to my RA. The RA reports it to upper management, and they say they can't really do anything about it, but if he comes in again, to call their security. A few months go by and there are no Richard sightings until I order from the same app again. Yet again, Richard is our driver, and yet again in a different car. I send my boyfriend to go collect the food again and report the incident to my RA again, and the food delivery app. I know that I was stupid in not immediately reporting it to campus security, as I had much more proof of the creepy behavior than he had of his innocence, but I was naive, and I didn't want my parents to find out about it at the time. Fortunately, I haven't seen Richard since then. This is actually my stepmom and her best friend's story. I have my own, but I'm so hesitant to drag some of them up. I'm hoping telling someone else's will open me up to a little more. My stepmom didn't like us much, but she told my sister, 3 years older, and I this experience growing up to scare us out of being stupid. It was my family's stranger danger story. My stepmom, we're gonna call her Macy, grew up as a kind of privileged teen in the 70s. And her mom had moved with her family over here, the States, from England when she was about 9. She went to a pretty nice high school and a really nice town. There, she made friends with a girl, Lily, who didn't exactly run with Macy's type of crowd. Popular, stereotypical, etc. They really hit it off, and Lily would take Macy out to do her type of stuff. Hiking, fishing, sailing. There's even a hilarious set of pictures of them camping. And my stepmom has raccoon eyes and it looks like she's hating everything. Anyways, because of Louie's influence, the two of them would do stuff like that a good amount. One Sunday, they decided to go hike in some hills about an hour away. Macy put on what I'm sure were her extremely expensive hiking shoes, and the two of them drove off to the hiking trails. Lily parked in this big clearing with makeshift parking spots, you know, like a piece of wood marking the head of a space, but there were no other cars there. This was only important in hindsight. They started hiking up the hill, off the path because Lily fancied herself as something of a badass. The hike was nothing extraordinary. If you asked my mom, she would just lament for 15 minutes how sticky and buggy it was. Anyways, they reached the top of the hill and my stepmom was done. The polished, pampered side of her was coming out and she groaned into Lily and begrudgingly said okay. They would rest and then walk down again, slower. They had been heading down the hill for maybe 10 minutes when Macy started bitching again. Lily conceded to walking down the side of the road instead of the rough hiking trail. So there they are, probably looking like a couple of tools geared up for hiking, and walking down a crappy road. And after not even 5 minutes, a truck pulled up next to them. It was red and rusty and just generally looked like a clunker. The guy driving rolled down the window and the girls looked in through the passenger side window. He had a big beard, a baseball cap pulled down, and long brown hair. He greeted them and even smiled through his beard, asking if they needed a ride. Macy described him as charming and even cute. Lily still says the moment he greeted them, her hackles went up. Despite her better judgment, my stepmom convinced her to get in the truck. It must only be a 10-minute drive down to the car, tops. The two girls opened the passenger's door to this rusty old thing, and the guy directed them behind the seat to get in the back. They settled in and the truck started rumbling forwards. Lily always says that was the point it hit her what a mistake they had just made. The back seat was clean enough, but there was a rope on the floor behind the driver's seat and 4 boxes of saran wrap half hanging out from under the passenger seat. It seemed creepy and weird, but Lily didn't want to freak out my stepmom, so she just kept her mouth shut. After 10 minutes, the woods didn't look any clearer, and they hadn't seen another car the whole time. Lily asked how long he thought it would be, and he said he was taking a different route down the hill and had to stop somewhere to get something first. That was it. The girls were 16 and 17, and Lily didn't want to press the issue. She was scared. She can remember his hair because she was sitting behind him. He looked like a woodsy guy, but his hair was super tangled and dirty. She noticed crusted mud on his collar and tried to find something identifiable about him, but just got scared the more she picked up on little details. He was youngish, strong-looking, and had a foot on both of them, so they didn't ask any more questions, and he didn't offer any information. They just drove on. Several minutes after that, they reached a tiny shack, log cabin looking like place right there in a clearing of trees. There was an old stump where someone had been chopping wood, and a huge axe stuck into the log. Lily was definitely on red alert now. The guy turned off the truck and slipped out of it saying, "I'll be right back, don't go anywhere," and he disappeared into the house. Lily tried to talk to my stepmom about how she was incredibly uncomfortable, but she mostly just dismissed it. Lily started begging, increasingly freaked out, and finally put her foot down, demanding Macy exited the truck with her. And so they got out and walked around the front of the vehicle. The house was about 50 yards in front of them. Why this guy would have left 2 young girls in the truck alone while going into the house is beyond me. And they wandered around looking at it hesitantly. If this guy really was decent and just trying to give them a ride, it would be super rude just to run off, right? My stepmom had this strict upbringing when it came to manners and a public persona, and she saw it as an issue of that nature. So she actually started to head back to the truck, opening the front door to climb in behind the driver's seat. Lily was pissed off and followed her to yell some more. On the driver's side floor, half hidden under the seat, there was a big hatchet. It had dried, red-brown stains covering the blade and stuck to the floor under it. Lily understandably lost her crap after seeing it, and my mom started getting hysterical. They decided that leaving was by far their best option at this point, and just booked it off the side of the property into the trees, until Lily was fairly confident they were on their way back down the hill. My stepmom cried all the way down. Lily felt bad about it, but was also completely freaked out that he would hear it and kept trying to calm her down. When they finally got back down to the bottom and saw the old wooden fence that surrounded the original parking area, they were relieved. But as they got closer, they saw it. The truck. It was parked on the other side of the gravelly makeshift lot, just sitting there, facing the other way innocently. They couldn't see if anyone was in it, and of course, Macy wanted to run for the car, but Lily was super hesitant. She managed to calm my stepmom down, saying that she wanted to wait before running out into the open to see what was out there. Remember, this is in the 70s, there's no cell phones, there was no ranger station or anyone around. The parking lot was big and empty and open, and who knows what would have happened if they decided to stroll across it. Thankfully, Lily convinced my stepmom to chill, and the two of them hunkered down against a big tree, hidden by bushes and other trees, and waited it out for what seemed like to be a couple of hours, when dark started to fall. All the animals started coming out and making noises, and my stepmom predictably started getting antsy about this and bothering Lily, who was tired and moments away from giving in. She was planning her dash to the car when they heard a clunk. Across the twilight-lit lot, they watched as one of the back doors of their car swung open, and the bearded guy slid his way out of the back seat. He got out, shut the door, looked around at the surrounding woods for several moments, and then walked back to his truck. The truck lumbered past their car and out of sight. Several minutes after watching him drive away, they sprinted to the car as quickly as they could, jumped in and peeled out before they had even shut the doors.